Hey, Parasite just won Best Picture, yay. But today I'm not gonna be talking about movies. I am the culture detective here and I'm investigating your TV shows, your favorite TV shows today, because I am going to do a very special TV review today. And I am going to talk about the Arrowverse crossover from the CW TV channel, where the five TV shows Supergirl, Batwoman, Arrow, The Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow, and Black Lightning come together and do one giant crossover, annual crossover. And this is the biggest one yet. So I saw the 5 episodes of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I, not gonna lie, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed. um, I wanted to like it. I really, really wanted to like it, but it's just bad. It's just bad. And yes, admittedly, I'm not a huge CWDC fan. I watched Supergirl season 1 and gave up because it just went downhill onwards. It's just getting worse and worse and worse every season with its unlikable characters, cringy dialogues, and the, concepts and undertones of the TV shows kept on being shoved down our throats. We have Batwoman season 1, which I don't care for at all. Arrow seems like the best one out of the bunch, with the most mature writing and the most serious production, but it is inconsistent. I also decided not to watch Legends of Tomorrow because I heard it's cringe, but I have watched The Flash ever since seasons 1 to 5. I stopped from season 5 because I don't even bother to watch season 6 because it's just getting worse and worse and worse. Even though The Flash started out amazing, it's just gotten more and more cringy, more and more weak. So now we have a CW crossover, which I think is the fourth or fifth crossover. I have seen the Alien Invasion one, the Nazi Multiverse one, and the latest one was the Freaky Friday one, which then sort of leads into this one, which is supposed to be the biggest, the most ultimate epic crossover episode series event ever with tons of crazy cameos. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna watch it. And I'm left disappointed. Yeah. So there are a few things that made me dislike this crossover event. I'm already looking past the cringy dialogues, the very annoying pep talks that are served as filler scenes, and the very crappy production. The the very bulky, clumsy, fake ass looking costumes make me not take this show seriously. But actually, earlier on for CW, the production is not that bad. But for some reason, I feel like the production, the costume design, it's getting worse and worse, cheaper and cheaper every time for some reason. And but yeah, I'm looking all past that, just basing off of the story. I still think it's a mess. It's all over the place. It doesn't make sense. And yes, it's a fantasy, sci-fi, action, crazy thing, but it's still a mess because the plot doesn't even follow its own rules in the second half of the story. The story sort of sets its own rules in the first two parts, and then later on, it just breaks its own rules for some reason with no particular explanation. And then we got the characters, which are also somewhat inconsistent. The plot is very loose. There are a lot of filler scenes, and I think the worst mistake that this crossover event had made is that it just feels like a derivative of Avengers Endgame and Infinity War. Yes, the first 3 parts is basically Infinity War, and the last 2 parts is basically Endgame, except the ending is way longer. And this is actually very And this actually makes a lot of sense given that if you do your own research, every single episode in this 5 episode event are written by 2 different writers, and it's different in each episode. So we have 10 different writers working on the same story. So the writing is inconsistent, the directing is inconsistent, everything is inconsistent, the tone shifts dramatically each part and hilariously so. It's a total friggin' mess. We got part 1, which happens on Supergirl. And as always, it started off cringy, and as per usual, I don't like Kara's character because she just seems like a very lame, cringy person who just doesn't do anything all that important. He just fights and shoots laser beams, and that's all she does. News arrived that a wave of antimatter is about to destroy the entire multiverse, and that leaves the anti-multiverse, which are all made up with antimatter, behind. And this is happening because a guy named the Anti-Monitor, basically the god of the entire anti-universe, is trying to attack the universe that the superheroes are in. So this is the plot. And then we have the Monitor, which is supposed to be a protagonist, some sort of deity or entity that sort of controls and masters everything in the universe and sort of controls destiny and can predict the future and stuff. But then not really at the same time because he himself makes mistakes as well. And then we have this book called the Book of Destiny, where you can see your own destiny in the book and you can actually just rewrite it if you have the book. And yeah. So these superheroes team up and try to stop this wave of antimatter, which is definitely not as interesting as Freaky Friday or Nazis, fighting superhuman Nazis. Yes. And then in part 1, the sky turns red, all Earths die, everyone panics. And then for some reason, there's this tower of antimatter beam where it sort of keeps the antimatter from reaching Earth or slows it down, even though eventually it will reach Earth. And then suddenly, the so-called army of the Anti-Monitor is trying to attack these superhumans and keep them from protecting the antimatter beam. And the so-called army is actually just a bunch of small dementors, like those in Harry Potter. They look exactly alike, and they're crap. They're really weak. One small punch and they're gone. Poof, they've died. So they're not really all that powerful. And then we have the ending of part 1, which is sad, but I feel like the build-up is not really all that worth it, and the sad moment isn't really all that sad, even though I appreciate the effort, I appreciate the risk being taken. And then we have parts 2 and 3, where after this character had died, there are a lot of characters spending a lot of time trying to revive this character, which, well, minor spoiler alert, didn't work. And it's a waste of time. And I don't know since when, but in Supergirl, there's this one character who is super duper obnoxious. Every time he's on screen, I just want to punch him because he just sucks. He's basically a British Jordan Peterson on coke. He's so friggin' annoying. Oh, the energy, radiation, alpha ray, gamma ray will reach Earth, and maybe this planet is going to die, and that planet is going to go away. Ugh. It's so annoying. And for some reason, he disappeared ever since part 1. Maybe he died. Maybe he didn't go along with Supergirl. I don't know. But I'm glad he disappeared. And then we have characters like Batwoman, who I thought was going to be a very cringy, cheesy person at first, but actually, she is kind of sassy and kind of rude and kind of badass at first, which is really nice, but that only applies to the beginning of the event. And later on, Batwoman is always being nice and being lame, and her character is like wallpaper. And then we have characters with more depth like Arrow and the Flash, who I want to see more of, but actually have very less screen time for some reason. And then we have part 2, which takes place in Batwoman, and some interesting scenes happen here and there, some cameos that I'm really happy about. But none of these scenes really feel all that interesting. We have the whole Lex Luthor storyline. Lex Luthor popped up out of nowhere and tried to kill all Supermans in all Earths, which is this storyline that doesn't really intertwine with the whole antimatter wave thing, so it's not really all that connected. But still, you gotta protect Supermen, right? So we have this whole tedious storyline, and whenever Superman is flying in the sky, it looks so fake. The CGI is so bad. It looks like terrible animation with terrible graphics. And then we have this other storyline, which is basically a bunch of pep talks. And then this other storyline, which again involves a revival of a character, which didn't really pan out all that well. And we have this other storyline, which involves going to other multiverses, but it's really not that interesting. Which then moves over to part 3, which takes place in The Flash. And I think part 3 is where the story finally takes off and start to get more interesting. And I also kind of like the twist ending of part 3. And then we have part 4, which is almost the complete opposite of parts 1 and 2 in terms of tone, because part 4 is extremely epic, ultimate, ridiculous, over the top, and to a point where you just can't take it seriously because it doesn't make sense. It just breaks its own rules, and it's a total mess. And also, it reminds me of Avengers Endgame a lot because in part 3, apparently all the superheroes failed. They all failed. So they got stuck in this one place, and they spent like apparently a lot of months in this one place. So people have beards, people have mustache now, people have grown old, but then not really because only this Ryan Choi character has grown old, which is weird. But I have to say, I must compliment the writers for suddenly adding this random character called Ryan Choi, an Asian. Apparently, according to the Monitor and the Book of Destiny, there are 7 paragons who are apparently the heroes who are going to save the universe. And apparently, Ryan Choi is one of the paragons, which is kind of funny, but then at the same time, it's kind of cool because he doesn't have any superpowers. He's just a normal human being, but he has a lot of heart. He's a good father, and I like that. Except at the ultimate climax at the end, which is very underwhelming because it didn't last too long and it's a very simple climax. Just a bunch of people fighting a bunch of Dementors, but still, we see the Flash sort of speeding up and fast punching these Dementors. We see laser beams, we see knives and all that stuff. Apparently, it is not that difficult to kill one of these Dementors because throughout the entire climax, Ryan Choi was punching these Dementors and they die as well. So it's really not that difficult to kill them, right? And then again, the whole climax, it was disappointing, it was underwhelming, it ended really shortly, and it still doesn't make sense. And one of the characters had to die twice for some reason, even though again it doesn't make sense. When you die, but then you're able to revive the body, but not able to revive the soul, so that you need to go to another place Apparently, it's a purgatory to revive the soul, but then some other person is in that world, which prevents the soul from getting out. But then the soul sort of gets out at the end and becomes a ghost. But then the ghost is also somehow real and tangible at the end. And the ghost became not a ghost again. Uh, yes, it doesn't make any sense. And then we have Part 5, which is the most disappointing episode of the entire event. Because it's basically the aftermath. The huge climax happened in Part 4. Uh, and Part 5 is basically an aftermath episode. You know, a cool down episode, which is dumb. It's 40 something minutes long. And the entire first half basically involves this dumb crime, which is totally irrelevant to the whole storyline. And then for the second half, the Anti-Monitor returns because apparently he isn't dead. So the superheroes teamed up once again to kill him once and for all. And the fight is really, really dumb. The Anti-Monitor really has an IQ of 10. Throughout the entire last fight, which isn't even the climax. It's just one little small ending fight. So yeah, overall, I am not so satisfied with this crossover event. The Nazi one, the story on the Nazi crossover is way tighter. The story in the Alien Invasion crossover is more focused and it makes more sense and it's less ridiculous. And the story in the Freaky Friday crossover is way more entertaining, only because it's Freaky Friday. Come on, it's entertaining, even though, yes, it's kind of a mess. But this crossover event, it's a mess. The dialogues are boring. I guess I do kind of enjoy the Ezra Miller and the Lucifer cameo. But the cameos themselves aren't really all that interesting. The characters are not that interesting either. The story doesn't make any sense. It's a mess. And I just don't think it's a good one. Kind of feeling a strong 3 to a light 4 on these 5 episodes. So, have you seen the Arrowverse crossover Crisis on Infinite Earths? From 1 to 10, how much did you rate it? Like if you like it and subscribe if you want more. And thanks for watching. Yay.